I've got all this material to get through, and if I don't get through it all, it's going to be absolutely terrible, and you're going to think this is just like the most ridiculous training program, and you're just going to go home and you're going to be phoning your friends, and you're going to go to the pub tonight with your mates, and you're going to be saying, that training program was just terrible, and that bloke's just such an idiot, and I can't believe I wasted 3 hours of my life in that training session. And then someone comes and say, you should phone up Watchdog, and you're going to ring up BBC and phone up the Watchdog, and the Watchdog are going to turn up tomorrow morning at video cameras at my house at like 7 o'clock tomorrow morning and say, oh my God, you're the worst person on the whole planet. And I'm going to be like trying to close the door, and the next thing you know, I'll be in the front page of the paper as the worst person in the whole world. Okay, that sounds ridiculous, right? And you might think that's just a really crazy thing. What are you talking about? But how many times in life have you thought 20 steps ahead of where you are now and thought of all the things that could go wrong and all the things that potentially, could cause you challenges? Is that not distraction?
Yeah.
Me thinking like this in that way,
yeah.
Is that helping me to do what I need to do in the next hour and 15 minutes? No. Now this is interesting because a lot of us do that, and it distracts us from doing what it is that we set out to do in the first place. Now what I couldn't do with that group of people in that room is I couldn't put a distraction into their brain. What I could do is cause some situations, some stressful situations which have that same impact, which is essentially cause a distraction from preventing them to focus on what it is they want to do. It was a stressful distraction. So whether that's an internal or an external stressful distraction, it basically has the same impact. So that's the reason that we did that. So again, this is really important for us to bear in mind that when we go into a state of stress, it was only designed for a short-term response. You can afford to shut down higher brain activity for short periods of time. If you stay in that state, it's going to have an impact on your life. If you're going into an exam, or if you're going into a presentation, you're going to a meeting or an interview, if you've got some important work to deal with, you're writing you're trying to get something done before a deadline, or you've got a project proposal or something like that needs to be done. If you're under extreme stress or pressure, your capacity or your ability to deal with that effectively is going to diminish. But a lot of us think that we need to be stressed to get our work done in the first place. Actually, it's not the case. It just feels like you're getting a lot more done. It's just your brain is working very quickly and very hard. But actually, I think what's the saying? Less haste and more speed. Yeah. And I think this is what tends to happen. We become very hasty, very panicky, and very anxious from their stress. So what else? What other systems could you shut down temporarily?
Talking a lot around the same thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So you're correct. It is basically linked to sort of your brain function, because obviously your brain isn't thinking clearly enough to talk eloquently. What about pain? Would you need to experience pain? How would pain help you if you're in a sort of a life-threatening danger, battle situation?
It's not going to help you.
No.
You're not going to be concentrating on that at all.
Exactly. Recently we had an opportunity to work with some soldiers that were returning from Afghanistan. Some of them were suffering from PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress syndrome. One of them was describing a situation where he was out on patrol with his colleagues. There was a few of them, and they were ambushed, and they were cornered, and they were in a situation where literally they had their backs against the wall. They were in a little sort of a kind of blown out building or whatever, and one of them had been shot. Now, at the time, he didn't realise he'd been shot, and they were in that situation about 20 minutes, half an hour, essentially trying to fight their way out of the situation. And then some reinforcements arrived, and they were put in a personnel carrier and taken out. And as he got into the personnel carrier and he kind of, relaxed, took his helmet off, he suddenly realised he had blood pouring down his arm, and he'd been shot in the shoulder. Now, he didn't experience the pain. He didn't even register that he'd been shot until he was out of that situation and he relaxed. Because if you think about it, if you're in a battle situation and you're experiencing that pain and you're aware of that pain, it's actually it may prevent you from getting out of that situation, because all of a sudden you're debilitated by that pain, which is preventing you from dealing with, the continuing attack. So pain is something that we are able to shut off. Now, pain is a good thing. Pain tells us there's something wrong. So we don't want to shut pain off completely, because if he didn't experience that pain eventually, he would have bled to death. So it's important that he does experience it, but to be able to turn it off long enough to get out of the dangerous situation. So again, this is important that we understand this, that sometimes, especially if you're in the heat of the moment in a battle or something, you really focus on something and you cut yourself and you don't even know, and then a short while later you realise, oh my God, I cut myself. But the adrenaline and the stress that you're experiencing is actually essentially shut off the pain receptor. And what else? Is there any other systems that you think we could shut off temporarily? There's like a couple more which are relevant for our discussion today.
not sure.
Okay. What about your immune system? Do you think that needs to be functioning efficiently if you're experiencing stress?
No.
You don't need to be worried about bugs and bacteria
No.
if you're in a short-term battle situation. So you could essentially shut your immune system down temporarily.
Yeah.
So stressed people are very likely to get ill. You know, short-term it could be, you know, flu, colds, skin conditions, allergies, asthma, eczema. Long-term it can lead to heart disease. British Heart Foundation have connected stress to heart disease and heart attack, diabetes, stroke. A number of cancers have been linked to stress. So, you know, there's a whole host of issues that we can experience as a direct result of stress. The NHS themselves have said 75 to 80% of all illnesses can be attributed back to stress. So being stressed has changed the way that your bodies function, which has led to you experiencing those illnesses. So it's important for us to bear that in mind and put it into context, just to give you a real good example of how this has an impact on society. There's a particular time of year that we collectively as a nation come down with a flu or a cold. Do you know what time of year that is? It's the peak of flu season.
Not Christmas time.
Close, just after. So the first couple of weeks in January, when people are most likely to get ill with a cold or a flu. And this is interesting. I just thought, well, you know, what happens in January? Do all these flu bugs come out of hibernation in January and strike us down as we go back to work after our Christmas break? But actually, no, that's not the case at all. They're there the whole year round. They're there in the summer. They're here right now. The reason that we get struck down in January, well, what do you think? What's the reason that we all collectively as a nation get ill in January?
You have, I mean, the lead up to Christmas is always very busy for most people, organising things, finishing things off at work, having family things. It's you just on a big treadmill, trying to get all those things out of the way, and then you've got a chance to relax a bit afterwards, maybe.
Okay. Well, you're pretty much correct. What we have learned is over the last few years that Christmas seems to be a very stressful time of year for a lot of people, especially over the last few years. That the stress of Christmas is actually increasing. We get more inquiries in the month of December than we do for the first 3 months of the following year. So to the point we've actually had to write a special guidebook on how to deal with the stress of Christmas, because exactly the same is all the pressures in the build up to Christmas, as well as us having lots of parties, drinking more alcohol, being up later, the financial pressures of Christmas. There's a lot of weighted expectation of getting it right, the cost, interpersonal issues because you're put in close proximity with family, which can then lead to conflicts and arguments and disagreements. You're spending more time indoors, less fresh air, less exercise, more time sat on the sofa watching reruns of The Great Escape, again more alcohol, richer foods. This all causes an overwhelming effect on the system, so it's physical stress, nutritional stress, etc., etc. So essentially it means that we essentially become overloaded and we go back to work in January and our immune system's been massively impeded by all of the experiences during the Christmas period, which lead us to being in a state where we're very likely to get ill. So this is important to bear in mind, because I always used to think this is related to the weather and it's because it's winter. But interestingly, they have flu season in other parts of the world as well, when it just happens to be the middle of summer at Christmas. So it's important that we bear this in mind, that we can massively influence our immune system's ability to deal with illnesses by the way we treat ourselves. And the last one for our discussion today, there's one other system in the body which does get massively impeded when we get stressed. And if you experience, let's say you had a lot of stress at work, if this system in your body becomes impeded, it's going to cause a lot of stress in your personal life.